talk about.
Hey, I'm Erica Wolf, and I live in River West, and I'm a feminist organizer. I work with my friends and my neighbors, talking about patriarchy and how it affects us in our everyday lives. A lot of the organizing that I do is somewhat informal. I'm a community organizer, so I sort of try to work with the people who are around me and the issues that are most pressing. So right now, I work with a group called the Midwest Feminist Collective, and it's a group of people who identify as feminists who want to build community with each other, and we watch films, and we're making posters, and just really want to be a safe space for people to talk about being a feminist and what they want to do with that feeling. Also, with the pretty informal group, we're building a program to train bar staff how to recognize harassment, how to recognize consent, and how to intervene as a bystander to make sure that people are safe and comfortable when they go out to the bars. Also work with Coalition for Justice, and really just believe that all of these different struggles are interconnected. So whether we're talking about patriarchy, or we're talking about poverty, or we're talking about violence by the police, these are all interconnected. Our communities are affected by these larger cultures and larger systems that really do a lot of work that we don't want to see happening. So we have to take action and work together and stand up against those things if we want to stop them. This summer and fall, I'm going to be working with the Wisconsin Bicycle Federation on a project called Connect 53212. And we're working with residents and business owners and people who are part of community organizations that are living and working in River West, in Harambe, and in Brewers Hill. And the goal is ultimately to get people out of their cars and on their bikes and walking around the neighborhood and using the buses. And related to that is the fact that a lot of people don't bike and bus and walk because there are safety concerns. So we really, in addition to getting people more active, we want to see our neighbors come together to make the streets more active, where there's more people around, and just so that neighborhood businesses are aware of the safety concerns and realize that they have a partner in the neighbors, rather than being afraid of the people that come to their stores or that frequent their organizational spaces. So in December of last year, someone posted a picture of themselves in the hospital, pretty beat up, flipping off the camera, saying, guess who didn't get raped? This woman right here. And she told her story of how she was attacked in Snail's Crossing. And honestly, what saved her life was not only her willingness to fight back in that moment, but the awareness that her neighbors heard her shouting, and they came out to support her, and they called the ambulance and they called the police. And I think that that's part of why she wasn't more injured and why she's still alive. And so Take Back the Night is an event that's been happening all over the world since the 70s to talk about, and it's usually responsive to these kinds of events, and that we saw that moment was not the only an isolated incident in the time. We found out actually after that happened, because this woman posted her photograph, that there were 3 active serial rapists that had already attacked 13 other people before her within a mile of our neighborhood. And in talking with the police as a result, they said, oh yes, we should have said something sooner, you're right, we could have done something different. And really what they said was that they were concerned that they were going to cause some kind of panic. And I said, we have a right to be afraid. We have a right to know these things. If I need to have a heightened sense of awareness when I'm out walking around by myself because there's someone that's been attacking people, jumping out of the bushes, that I should know to keep an eye out for the bushes. And if you know what the person looks like or have any kind of a description, the police have a responsibility to tell those of us who live and work here that this is a concern, because the method that they use to stop violence and to catch these people is having folks report when they see someone or report when something happens. And if we don't know to be on the lookout for someone, or we don't know to be on the lookout for ourselves, we are just, continuing the cycle of violence that says that we expect these predators to be out there, and that we accept that this is just part of living in a city. And I along with other people, just refuse to accept that living in a city means that there's constantly a threat of violence. And I think we see from Black Lives Matter and the work of the Coalition for Justice and all kinds of organizations like the people that I work with, that we aren't fine with that, and we don't want to see that continue. And whether the police are with us or not, we're going to do something about it. We're not going to just sit here and wait for someone to come and save us. We are going to band together and protect ourselves. So as a community organizer and also just as a person living in the world, feminism is really important to me, because it's not really something that I think is a cause or something that I think is cool. I mean, it's really about basic survival. When I walk around by myself or ride my bike by myself, going to and from the store or my job, or going out to have a good time with my friends, and I wish that this wasn't work that I had to do. I wish that there weren't these kinds of concerns about how people disregard consent, or about how people catcall you on the street, or about how people touch you when you don't want to be touched. And these are things that just are there, and we can either ignore them or try to cope with the fact that they exist, or we can work together and say that these things need to stop. And so when I did the Take Back the Night at Snail's Crossing in December of last year, this was really to bring attention to the fact that we have a culture that expects women to be raped and expects violence to happen to women. And I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to be a part of a culture or community that says that that's okay. And I think we saw from the response from the people who came to Take Back the Night that we don't feel that way in our neighborhood, but many people feel powerless to stop it, because it's so much bigger than one person or one block. It's really about our culture. And so when we stop saying, when we stop victim blaming and say, women need to have self-defense classes, or you need to carry a weapon, like, we should be at a place where we say it's unacceptable in any circumstance for women to be treated the way that we're expected to be treated. And when we all stand up and say that, and we have each other's back, and we look out for each other, that's when these things really stop. It doesn't come because somebody spends money, and it doesn't happen because there's some really snazzy ad campaign. These things change because we're unwilling to accept it, and because we resist the patterns that are around us all the time.
And then, sorry, I totally lost track of what I was going to say. I am Natalia Cos Vallejo. I'm a reproductive justice activist and advocate and public speaker, and I've worked mostly with Planned Parenthood and a few other organizations over the years to try to bring some understanding and light to the issues that face women, specifically abortion. So Planned Parenthood does a few different things in the community. They started out as an organization to help women with medical care and birth control and education, but because they've been under attack since their inception, they've also had to devote a lot of resources to policy change and just culture change in general. So a lot of their resources are going towards, lobbying, having forces in the state capitol and in Washington, D.C., and towards activism and kind of social justice issues. So as an organization, what's really unique about Planned Parenthood's the position that they're in is that they end up having to justify their own existence constantly, because we're always under attack from religious groups and corporate lobbies, and Republicans in general. Generally, there's this idea that what Planned Parenthood does and the service it provides are somehow extra, that they're not things that women should have access to, whether that's pap smears or STD testing or birth control or abortions. And there's all kinds of organizations and lobbyists that spend millions of dollars, probably billions of dollars a year, trying to discredit Planned Parenthood. When in reality we know that every dollar that goes into prevention and education saves the public millions of dollars, as far as when women aren't having unplanned pregnancies, they don't end up costing and relying on the system as much as they would, and they end up having healthier families, which saves everybody money and is better for our society as a whole. But you have all these really rich Republican and conservative lobbyists who want to try to say that that's not the case, and that Planned Parenthood doesn't have a place in our society. And I would kind of agree with them. I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need Planned Parenthood, because the healthcare services they provide would be covered for everybody already. But unfortunately, that's not the way it is right now. So in the meantime, Planned Parenthood has to exist, and they have to fight really hard to stay open and keep their doors open. In Wisconsin alone, we've seen several clinics close in the last couple of years. Sometimes that's because of the budget cuts that Scott Walker has, and other politicians have enforced, but also other times it's because of more kind of sneaky law changes that force the clinics to close. Like, for example, you have the admitting privileges law, which states that no clinic can perform abortions unless the doctor on staff has admitting privileges at a hospital within 20 miles, or some number like that. That rule is ridiculous, frankly. The whole point of that, ostensibly, is that, if for some reason something went wrong in the procedure, the doctor would be able to take the patient to a bigger hospital for emergency room care. Well, if you have a patient that's bleeding out, an emergency room isn't going to deny them service, whether the doctor who is providing the abortion has admitting privileges at that hospital or not. So that makes absolutely no sense. Second of all, abortion is one of the safest procedures around. It's 7 times safer than actually carrying a child to term and giving birth. It's not even that invasive. I mean, there's no incisions or cuts made at all. It's just in and out. So the idea that politicians would try to force a law upon people that says that doctors need admitting privileges to these huge hospitals just to perform a very simple, safe, and common procedure is ridiculous. And we saw a clinic close here in Wisconsin because of that last year. So they're really injecting a lot of politics into the work that Planned Parenthood does to try to discredit the organization. And really, that just makes women suffer. It makes women and families in Wisconsin suffer. Who needs Planned Parenthood? I mean, everybody needs Planned Parenthood. Everyone. If you think about it from kind of a disease control outlook, Planned Parenthood is one of the organizations that's done the absolute most to prevent and then treat STDs in the whole country. So, nobody wants to get an STD. So I think we could all agree that it's good for everyone if Planned Parenthood exists. And in that sense, it's not just for women, and I think that people forget that. I've had male friends who weren't even sure if they could go to Planned Parenthood for services or not, and it's like, of course you can. They serve everybody. Just because they happen to provide abortions doesn't mean that they don't also provide services for men. I think it's also really important to remember that women who are choosing to give birth can also use Planned Parenthood as a resource. I actually had a friend recently find out that she was pregnant and she didn't know where she could go for an affordable first exam, and I told her Planned Parenthood, and she said, "Isn't that where you just go to get your birth control pills?" No, Planned Parenthood services people of all genders who are making different decisions about whether or not they want to have children or what they want to do with their life and their sexual health, and they're pretty much there for you no matter what you choose. So yeah, I think everybody can use Planned Parenthood, and it's an organization that will serve the entire community. If Planned Parenthood didn't exist, I don't even want to think about that. I don't know how I would have gotten access to information, to non-judgmental treatment, to birth control. I don't know how I'd have access to any of that if Planned Parenthood didn't exist. I think that we'd be seeing a lot more unwanted pregnancies, and when you see more unwanted pregnancies, you see a lot more unwanted children, and it's really sad, but I mean, I wouldn't want to live in a world without Planned Parenthood.
To not take the small victories for granted, because even if you just change one person's way of thinking about the word feminism. My name is Maddie Conway, and I'm a co-founder of the National Organization for Women at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I consider myself a feminist because I think it's important to embrace people's differences, but at the same time assure that everyone is receiving equal opportunities. I think that now has changed the environment on campus in a few different ways. First, just bringing the issues of feminism to the foreground, and second, creating a team of allies to combat these issues. Some of the campaigns we've supported were Love Your Body Day, which just promoted positive self-body image, and this semester, right now, we're in the week of empowerment. So just challenging people to rethink the way that they view feminism and think about personal definitions of feminism and how to be a feminist activist. And we're ending the week with a movie showing of The Hunting Ground, which is a documentary talking about campus sexual assault and what we can do to prevent that. Recommendations for Milwaukee feminists interested in creating a chapter of Now would be to just go at everything with undying amounts of passion, and that will really carry you through. You're going to hit a lot of roadblocks and challenges, but you just need to remind yourself why this is important to you and why we need to change this. And to not take the small victories for granted, because even if you just change one person's way of thinking about the word feminism, that can be huge, and that's moving the movement along. As for Milwaukee Now pairing with Madison Now, I think that's an awesome way to strengthen the feminist movement, and it kind of encourages that idea of sisterhood, and I think that would be a great way to just share ideas and to really make things happen on a larger scale.